I'm just going to have a brief chat with you about some of the things I found in the last couple of months joining sort of the Bisbee family in the Cochise County area. I took some of the communications that I produced for staff and council and threw it into this app online. It's called a word cloud. And it will search out all of the words in your documents, and the most frequently used words are the ones that appear in the word cloud. And the bigger they are, the more often you have used them in your documents. And so that's where this came from, and I think it's interesting. Software, procurement, and plan and development all seem to be fairly large words in there. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about over at City Hall. To jump in, I'm going to talk about realities first, and then I'm going to talk about some of the strategies that we're using to address where we stand as a city. A lot of this sounds really depressing, but all it is really challenges that we need to figure out a way to plan through and overcome. I see that a lot of small localities, including ours, have had negative trends. I've been here in Arizona now since about 2010, and I've been watching local governments here. We're no different than the rest. We've been having negative trending. We've seen spending greater than the revenues, and we've been chipping away at our reserves. The employment sector in the county is challenging as well. Some 30% of the employment sector here is local government, and another 12% is military. So some diversification in the employment base would create a little more stability for us here. As right now, defense spending sounds like it's headed up, and that's a good thing for us, but we don't know that that's always going to be the case. So a little diversification in the employment portfolio would be helpful. There's a growing physical gap in Arizona between the counties and cities that are doing well and the counties and cities that aren't doing so well. And so trying to move the polar ends towards the middle has been very difficult given the political and economic realities of the last several years. The state allocated shared resources that we enjoy have not been there for us. As we went through the recession, the state took some of that funding away. And with the declining population count, that's kind of a double whammy because a lot of those allocated revenues come to us by population. Well, population count affects those calculations. Local spending, as I said, has been a little bit greater than our revenues, and many of our local programs and our rates have not been adjusted. And so there's been quite a bit of creep in the subsidy levels that help ensure that we're delivering the services and programs to our public. That's part of what has contributed to the gap that we have in our budget. Over time, our response to the economic challenges has been largely to cut people, but not to cut programs. And without a balancing act there, we've lost some professional skill sets, we've lost institutional memory. There's some organizational knowledge related to the processes that we have and the reason why they're built the way they are. And that kind of information gets lost, and then you begin to lose service quality when you see that happening. So at the city, these are some of the realities we see facing us in terms of a challenge. We are now approaching a point where we have zeroed our reserves, which means we need to come to a neutral position with our financial activity to be sustainable. So that's one of the major challenges we face. Excuse me. In addressing that, we've kind of got three major areas that we're focusing on. And one is the administration, because as we begin to improve our efficiency and our effectiveness in the administration, we can have a more immediate impact on finances and our quality of service. So that's one of the key things that we're working on first. Another thing that we're looking at is infrastructures. The city's infrastructures have been aging, and not a lot of money has been put into those infrastructures. Those infrastructures have a very strong correlation to economic development and sustainable communities. So it's important for us to maintain our services. And then lastly, playing to our strong suits, really the low-hanging fruit for us is to strengthen the things that we're already doing well and try to work to create a larger impact from those things. So I'm going to dial into just a few of these. In the administration, the fire has been a terrible tragedy for us. It completely changed our administrative lives. But those challenges have presented some opportunities as well. The county very graciously took us in. They had some vacant space. And literally the day after the fire, we walked around and put names on doors. We have not had to buy new tables. We haven't had to buy computers. We didn't have to buy a phone system. We didn't have to install software. We just moved into ready-to-go office space, connected our server, and we were up and going. Now, those are all items that you as taxpayers have paid for once already, and we're now getting a second life out of those things. We are looking at the county at cooperative opportunities similar to that in order to stretch our dollar even further. So one of the things and I have to tell you, Ed Gilligan is an amazing man, and he has bent over backwards to help us stay operational and to empower us to move forward. We ran payroll the week of the fire. We were on time. We got our processes up and running, and Ed made sure we had a place to hang our hat. So in working with Ed, we've begun to rethink some of the ways we deliver service and materials to the community. One of the first things that we touched on was motor pool. Rather than the city buying cars or retiring cars out of police service and continuing to maintain those cars with our own force, we approached the county about some sort of a lease program where we might pay by the mile and use their motor pool and allow their people to maintain those vehicles. It just so happens that the way the county works, they have a Voyager gas card in each car. And by having access to those gas cards, we gain access to the county's discount rate on fuel, which is 25 to 30 cents off per gallon. And we don't have that at the city. That also helps me avoid buying fuel at 10,000 gallons at a whack. So I don't have to come up with big chunks of money. I can pay by the mile. We're looking at shared resources and shared professional resources as well. The city really doesn't have the funds to hire a full-time planning director. In fact, Joe Ward, he's our star player in community development. He's also our only player in community development. He does planning and zoning, code enforcement, and building inspections all on his own. So by virtue of being close to the county and cooperating with the county, we have the opportunity to take advantage of some of their skill sets. Now, we need to pay our fair share. We need to pay our way, but it's way more effective than us going out and trying to find someone that wants to move to Bisbee to be a planning director. So we're beginning to discover areas where we have overlapping service and parallel concerns, and it just makes sense. The county's procurement process, they purchase way more paper than we do. They get a way better unit rate on that, and it makes sense for us, especially since we're together now, for us to be taking advantage of their procurement process for consumables. There's some mapping things that we want to work on with the county. When you look at the City of Bisbee and our GIS mapping and our zoning maps, they are not correct, and we need to get those corrected. The county has correct GIS information. We just need to cooperate with the county and work on those. And then we're working on the development of a customer services initiative that would help us bring volunteers into the administrative service in Bisbee. We have a very hard time with a limited headcount, closing the communication loop with our customers to let them know how things turned out with either their complaint or their service provision. So we're going to be working on customer service in a volunteer corps. This has already been successful. We had to ram a firehouse subs grant for equipment for our fire department through, and customer service helped us. They championed that and got it through very quickly. Infrastructure mapping. We do not have a map that you can pull up in a tablet and find a fire hydrant or a water valve. And that's a great detriment to our fire department. They're carrying a lot of this information around in their heads, and given the verticality of Old Bisbee, there's special strategy that's necessary to get water to certain places. And that means you have to connect to certain hydrants if you want to get water up to another level. Those facilities and that strategy needs to be laid out in a virtual way so that the guy on the truck has a tablet in the cab and he can see exactly where things are and what needs to happen to respond. I got to hand it to Chief Castillo. He's now out there maintaining our infrastructure. He's out there rehabilitating the hydrants. You'll see, I think I have a picture in here of them working on one of our hydrants. I'll show you that a little bit later. I mentioned fees, fines, and rates. We have not kept up with the economy on what we charge for services, and to some degree that's the council's decision. If they want to provide some additional funding to help subsidize something for our community, that's healthy, and that's what councils are for. But we need to understand exactly how big those subsidies are, and we haven't kept track of that. We do need to go through a tax audit. We've seen a transformation of some of our residential stock into bed and breakfasts, and we need to get after that and make sure everybody's up to speed and playing the same game. Risk assessment, IT, systems, software, that's something that we're embarking on soon. I hope to have some screens fielded around town in places where people frequent that will have information about what the local government is doing. We want to duplicate the cork boards where we staple up the notices for the council meetings, all those pieces of paper that the government requires us to put up. We think we can put those up on a virtual screen and then have a slideshow after those have shown for a few minutes. So that should be an interesting way to communicate with the public. There are some softwares that we need to install. We're still doing payroll by hand. It takes about 1 FTE just to deal with our payroll. If you think about it, the fire department has their own pay periods and their own rules. So do the police department. So does the administration. It's not as straightforward as you might think. Let's see. There's some policy amendments that just surfaced in council's agenda this last week that we need to address. They affect our ability to function as an administration. And by addressing those policies, we'll become a little more efficient and up to date with the rest of the administrations here in Arizona. Let's see. We will be embarking on a fiscal plan. You'll see me bring Mark Reeder with Stifel to the city to talk about our debt structure. And Pat Walker will be back to do some work on a financial plan. It's going to take us about 5 years, I think, to dig out. And I think that's going to be a public process that plays out through work sessions and action items with the council, and we would invite the public to participate in that. There has been talk about resurrecting a trolley route, not a trolley, but a trolley route that would run from one end of Old Bisbee to another and better connect the mine tour to Old Bisbee. There's some parking things that we're looking at there, as well as sidewalks and crossings that would also be part of that. So look for that to come forward in the future. I think the most interesting thing right now on the page is the Naco wastewater treatment plant issue. Did everybody see that article that came out about waste from Mexico coming into the U.S.? Did y'all see that? That kind of went viral, and McSally and McCain and Flake kind of latched on to that, and they all visited. And while everyone was talking about that, I approached the mayor to say, why can't our wastewater treatment plant be the solution? We're local, we're more agile than the state, we're way more agile than the Fed, and if we could be a solution to this, it might be a way for us to enhance our plant at the same time. The proposal that we've got coming through BEC and NADBank and the EPA right now would involve us receiving flows from Naco, but Mexico enhancing our plant to be able to take them. And the enhancement of our plant would provide benefits to us too. Storage, our collection system's really old. And when it rains, it soaks up all the rain and it tries to send all the rain down to the wastewater treatment plant at the same time. We get over 1 million gallons when it really rains. We need storage for that. We don't have it. Right now it overtops. It's a problem. So if we go through this project, we will have storage on the front end of our plant that will help us control that. That front end facility that would receive NACO's flows and allow them to pre-treat before we meter them into our biological process, that storage facility is also one that would receive septic haulers waste. So everybody who has a septic tank that gets pumped out, that stuff would wind up coming to us instead of having to go outside of Bisbee, and it would create a revenue stream for our plant. The flow from NACO is going to be about as much as the flow from Bisbee. We flow about 450,000 gallons a day. If NACO boosts the size of our plant to take their flows, and we have somewhere close to 800 to 1 million gallons of effluent coming out of our plant, that's A+ effluent. I mean, you don't drink it, but you can get in it. If we can recharge that effluent back down into our aquifer here in Bisbee, we could help preserve the aquifer here in Bisbee. That 800,000 gallons a day, if ADEQ will give us recharge credits like they give, I think, Sierra Vista, we can market those. Those water rights, those water credits, we could sell to communities that are growing like wildfire up north. It could be a significant revenue stream for the city. So this project that we're talking about at the wastewater treatment plant, not only is it kind of an international effort where our first rule in this was no Bisbee dollars go into it. If we're going to do this thing, Mexico and the Fed's going to have to pay for it. We may be able to benefit from the taxpayers, the taxes that you have all sent to the Fed. We may be able to bring some of those back to Bisbee and put them to work. So we're getting updates on that soon. The mayor's been in contact with McSally's office, and we're hoping that Beck's proposal and what NADBank has to say will be positive. We've gotten a thumbs up from the EPA and a thumbs up from ADEQ. We do think that this is going to come together. With the fire, the historic district in Warren has kind of surfaced. We're looking at what are we going to do with the City Hall building there. If we can finish the work on the historic district in Warren, we can pass tax incentives on to property owners who have properties that participate or contribute to the historic district. And that would be a financial windfall for the city as well as our residents. We are working on feasibility. We've secured a grant for a feasibility analysis for a science center. We've been working with U of A on that. We've got really positive signs on that becoming a reality. I have been working with Tom Woody over at the school to try and begin to involve high school seniors in our administrative process, not for them to do stapling and copying, but for them to do meaningful work. The fire destroyed a lot. It didn't destroy your sewer billing, so don't think that you're going to skip out on that. But it did destroy some of our permitting information, and so there's land use files that we have to rebuild, which means we've got to interface with the tax assessor's office. Then we've got to do research, and so as we go through some of that work, we want to involve the high school kids. There's some legal land development concepts that they might be able to learn. We've got a really large, eclectic mix of challenges in front of us. I think that's kind of appropriate for Bisbee. It's pretty eclectic. And as you see us go through these three strategies, keep in mind the council is doing a huge amount of work to be able to bring these things and act on them. They have a general plan that was updated a while back, but they have a strategic plan that they have to maintain. Now they're going to have a financial plan that they have to maintain. And they're asking us to do things that are in alignment with those plans to achieve their visions for the community. It takes an incredible amount of work on their part to be able to direct and guide all of this activity. And I just want to thank the council for the vote of confidence in bringing me on board. It's been a very interesting first 2 months on the job, but I have to say I've really enjoyed the challenge, and Our leadership here is something special. You don't see a team like this every day. They are really working outside of their assigned duties to make sure everything gets done. And I haven't come across such a hard-working crowd that's dedicated like this before. That was one of the things that really made me want to stay. The sewer plant project, if that happens and we get this robust sewer plant a mile and a half north of the NACO border, our airport is about a mile and a half away. And I want to go to the EDA and get a pipeline to put sewer service at our airport. The city owns 80 acres at the end of that airport, and I think that we could create a business park there. So in terms of the things that we're working on, I cannot directly charge head first at PSPRS and get the legislature to do anything about it this session. They have a $100 million budget gap. I'm not going to get anything out of that. But what I am hopeful for is if the historic district plan and the City Hall renovation project and the Mine Foundation comes about and we do this international sewer plant project and we create an industrial park and we tended to our own house by dealing with rates and we've adopted softwares and we can now show increased efficiency with our staff, I want to be able to take all that to the state next year and say, this is where we stand, and based on these projects, this is what our cash flow is going to look like, but we need a little bit of bridge financing to get between now and when those seeds start to bear fruit. So because it'll take a couple of years for the park to create employment or the wastewater, the effluent recharge to generate cash. And we need help along the way to get there. So I'm hopeful that that strategy will work. It's something I've been discussing with the mayor and working with the League of Municipalities. I think we stand a fairly good chance if we narrow the category so that the legislature is not trying to help every single community out there, but they're only looking at the most intensely affected communities under a certain population threshold. So the really fragile communities that are taking a huge hit. Does that... Any other questions? Wow, you guys are easy. Well, I won't be here next year, right? You have another speaker, right? Because you'll come up with the questions then, I know. Thank you so much.
Once again, thank you for attending today's event.
Hi, I'm Marilis Faree, and I'd like to introduce you to some of the fashions we're offering this fall at Pantera Gallery, located on Main Street in colorful Bisbee, Arizona, where the weather is always better. Offering a personalized service, my staff, Abigail, Colleen, and Tonette, bring years of experience to assist you in creating a unique and individualized look.
Marilis Faree has been on a fashion shopping spree, and she's back from New York with a gallery full of fall fashions. So come on in to Pantera Gallery on Main Street in Bisbee and try us on.
With a personal touch, Pantera.